Going to be the instructional video for the 2003 to 2005 Honda Civic Hybrid charger harness for the Maxx hybrid battery charging system. Well, first of all, we'll need a couple of tools. We will need a 10 millimeter, I prefer a 10 millimeter swivel extension, and I use an impact gun. I'm sure there's a way that you can get it to work with a drill, or a regular ratchet would work as well. You'll also need a Torx bit. T30 is the size for the specialty bolts that hold the IMA cover on the car itself. To get the battery loose, you're going to need a 12 millimeter socket and some kind of extension as well. To get the lower bolts are going to be a little bit harder to reach. So let's get to it. I've already have a harness in this car already, so some of the work has already been done, but I'll make sure to note still some of the areas that need to be addressed. First of all, the bottom lower seat, if you reach over to the right here, there will be one 10 millimeter bolt here holding this bottom of the seat onto the car, and you would get in here with the 10 millimeter, of course, and get that out of there. Once you have that out, you'll be able to lift underneath the front of the seat here, and both sides will have a piece of metal that will pop out, and then you can slide the rear seat out itself and put that aside someplace safe. Careful not to scratch the paint with those two metal prongs that are in the front of the seat here. So outside of that, the rear seat itself, they have two more 10 millimeter bolts holding it in, one on the left side here, one on the right side. You'll need to remove those in order to get access to the IMA cover behind the seat there. When you have those two sides completed with the two 10 millimeter bolts, you probably want to reach up here and take this seat belt and slide it out of this little holster here and get some slack in it, and move it over to the side here. Once you have those 10 millimeter bolts out of there, the seat belt's out of the way, you'll actually want to take a hold of the rear seat here and pull upwards on it. There's some hooks that are in the back of the seat there, so if you pull straight up on it, you'll be able to pop it out. And once you feel that the top side is broken free, move it forward, and out comes the back of the rear seat there. With this seat belt that you took loose over here, you're going to want to grab that and bring that over the side with the rightmost seat belt behind the driver's, or on the driver's side as well. And then at this point, you could take out the back of the rear seat too. Of course, attention not to scratch the paint. This particular car has seen some rough times, so it's not that big of a concern. But when you have this rear seat out, you probably want to take this seat belt here and try to get it out of the way. What I found works is if you take this seat belt here, there's a door latch for the door itself on the side of the car. If you take that, and you can actually fit that inside of that door latch here. Let's see if I can get that show up here. Yeah, you stick it in here, and that'll bring the seat belt and get it right out of the way there for you here. Probably want to get some slack enough to get this underneath the cover and out of the way, so we are not obstructed at this point. Alright, now that we're onto the back cover, we still have that 10 millimeter socket handy. We're going to go ahead and take these two bolts here out, and this is what covers the IMA main battery power switch here. Got those two bolts out of here. We're going to pull back on this cover here, and he'll expose the the switch here. There's a little plastic locking mechanism that you want to pull straight up on and pull that out of there, and that'll allow you to put the IMA system into the off position and start to get this thing a little bit safer to work with. Obviously the nominal voltage on this battery pack is 144, but fully charged it could be well over 170 volts, 174. So definitely enough to cause some serious damage if you were to touch the wrong thing. Alright, once we got the 10mm bolts out of there, the IMA switch is off. You want to go ahead and grab your T30 Torx bit there and set that drill in counterclockwise fashion, or if you're using some kind of ratchet attachment, then in a much slower fashion. We're going to go ahead and remove these bolts, not in any particular order, just get them all put together and stick them in a safe place. Okay, left off taking all the bolts out of the cover. There actually will be one more, I believe it's a 10mm bolt on the inside here of the IMA power switch that will need to be removed. On this one in particular, I don't see one. So we'll just go ahead and remove this cover once you have all those 10 bolts with the Torx heads on them, and this one 10mm can be removed, and the cover should come right out at that point. You'll expose the IMA battery. You'll have the battery control module, the motor control module, the DC to DC converter, and associated electronics. What we're going to be concerned about is mainly the battery and routing of the harness itself. So what we're going to do obviously is make sure that the switch is off, and we're going to get our trusty voltmeter. Yeah, once you have your voltmeter, and one of these can be picked up at the local Harbor Freight for $7, $8, $9, depending on what sales are going on at the time. But you're going to want to put the positive on the positive and the negative on the negative here, and make sure that you don't have any voltage here. Might be some residual in the capacitors and such that needs to be bled off. But yeah, you can see that there's nothing here. Zero showing up on the gauge, so this is as safe as it can get at this point to work with. And we're going to go ahead and start disassembly and getting ready to install the harness. We'll start with a 10mm. We have a little retaining clip up here above the battery pack that we need to just loosen up. We don't need to remove it, just enough to pull this out and move it to the side. Move it up top there. And the positive and negative terminal, we want to take those out one at a time here. Negative, positive, and put those in a safe place. The ones going to be used for that will have a yellow paint on them typically, and we'll have the number 10 for grade. You'll see an orange harness here that actually underneath there'll be a little lever that you can push on it. It'll be on the battery side of the harness. When you push down, it releases the lock, and you can pull this connection right out of there. Up top here will be some additional harnesses, 1, 2, 3. You'll want to pull those out. Again, pushing down on the lever and pulling. 1, 2, 3. We got those 3 up and out of the way here. And there will be a little black retaining clip here that you want to pinch both sides of while pulling to get that out of there. Get that loose. That's up and out of the way here, and there's a little ground wire on the 10mm bolt. You want to break that loose and back that out of there. Probably want to unscrew the rest of it by hand here so you don't drop it. And we'll move that out of the way. And let's see what's left here. We got one orange plug here with a lever on it. Take that and press down and pull it out. And it has one more of those black clips at the top here. And you want to pinch and pull that through. There we go. So those should be all of our connections here in between. And the next step will be loosening the battery pack itself to be moved out of the way here and able to access some of these connections on the battery that we need to get to. Alright, we have a 12mm now socket we're going to be using here. I would probably loosen the lower ones first. Again, this has about a 3 or 4 inch extension, maybe 6 inch extension on it. And down over to the right corner at the bottom, got one 12mm bolt. Left side here, we got the second 12mm bolt. We're now onto the top. One last one here. Alright, that's all 4 connections. It'll be a little top heavy now, so we'll be careful that the battery doesn't fall down on you. But there's 2 straps here that you just slightly pull up on and easily slide that battery back and get you access to some of these connections here. It does weigh a little bit, so just be careful. You could pretty much balance it right here on the lip to gain access to some of these connections here. I'm going to change the camera position to get you a better look at what we'll be working with. Right, onto the harness itself and the battery connections. First of all, at this point, our preference of mounting location is going to be one of these child seat retaining locks that they put behind the rear seat here. There's one on each side. The one behind the passenger rear is the one that we would use. There's a little plastic piece, kind of a hinge, that goes back here. If you have children, if you're using that thing, then by all means find a different location to mount that. But this is the preferred location for us, for example. You could actually pop that out of there. If you flip it up, maybe stick a flat-bladed screwdriver or maybe a little bit of muscle, just pop that out of there. Careful not to break these side tabs on each side here. But you can remove this. It's a lot easier to work with that way. You can pick up a step drill bit from Harbor Freight for a couple of dollars, and we're going to be stepping this down to about a 1-inch hole. Take a look at the orientation and location of how we mounted it on this particular one, and that could be your reference point when you decide to drill yours out to that 1-inch hole. We provide screws for mounting. We use rivets in this point for this particular car. Anyhow, what you're going to do is you're going to grab the other end of your harness here with the positive, negative ring terminals here for the Civic hybrids. We're going to have ring terminals on these, at least at this particular juncture, until we find any more convenient way to wire this, but at this point this is how these are going to come set up with the ring terminals. Alright, back here at the child safety lock, with the fuse housing that we have here, it's a little tight clearance in there, so you might want to stick a screwdriver in there and open that up a little bit to make sure that you can get this fuse in that little slot there. But what we're going to go ahead and do is fish these through this little slot in the child seat lock latch here. Like I said, this is a matter of where we like to have this port installed. I mean, there's enough wiring provided that you can have a few different options as far as where you would like to have it mounted. When you're fishing it in there, a lot of times you can look through this hole right here and see where this is heading out. What we're going to try to do is catch it down here in this crack here. So with a flashlight or whatnot, if you want to take a look in there and see if you can fish that through, this is where we're going to end up catching it, right at the bottom here, where these wires end up coming through this grommet here. I'm going to go ahead and find these wires and tug them over, and we'll continue on. If you're using this location for routing, you want to go through the back, because when you put that panel back on there, it's not going to fully close unless you go through the back side. So feed that through like so. Get this all the way down. Now this will fully close. Put one side in, the other side in, and there she is. Alright, I'm going to grab the wires again and then we'll finish. Another way to get those wires through and know exactly where they're at is to remove this side panel of the trunk here, or you can probably even get in here without having to do that. And as you can see, this is where the wires are coming through into the trunk area here. There's a little back panel here on the back of the trunk here that without taking that side panel off, this one was already off, but you could probably peel this back just a little bit and see where these wires are coming through. What we're probably going to go ahead and do is put them over the IMA fan. And as you can see, they're dropped down in there. And there's daylight on the other end. That's where we're going to want to head out, and we're going to catch it on the inside of the car again. Back inside the car, let's see where the wires are coming back through again. Go ahead and tug that through, grab our ground, and these are what we need to get around. What we're going to be doing is pulling this grommet loose here. Going to be going behind and inside the IMA cover through this same location as the rest of the wires here. Got the wires back down again. Pull up all that slack. And behind here, we're going to go ahead and go underneath these wires. And we're going to go back on eventually. We'll have both leads. we have both positive and negative leads on the battery side of things. And I'm going to change camera angle so you can take a look at these connections one more time. Looking at the top of the, which would be the left side of the battery, with the terminals that we're going to be accessing in order to get our power and ground to the battery pack itself. In order to test this, we're going to go ahead, for purposes of education, turn the battery pack back on real quick. We got this will be the negative down at the bottom. The positive we're actually going to grab from the top of this relay here. Make sure you're not touching this with your bare hands, and definitely would recommend wearing gloves. So you can see negative right here, say this screw for example, and this screw here would be the positive connection. It shows a positive voltage of 139.5 volts. If for whatever reason you had the wrong connections, it would show negative. Negative meaning you got positive and negative reversed. It's not going to hurt the meter here, but make sure that you're not putting the connections incorrectly. So positive we're going to get here, negative going to get from this screw. If you had a Sharpie or magic marker, probably making a mark on each one of those would be a good indication to you where you need to be taking those screws out, in case you forget or get disoriented. We're going to go ahead and take this battery switch back to off again, make it safe to operate. Test one more time for voltage here, negative, positive, 0.7, 0.1, 0. So no more charge left with those connections, and we can go ahead and loosen these up and make our connections. You're going to find the appropriate screwdriver or drill bit, not drill bit, but bit, and make sure that you're using the right size for this. If it's too loose, if it's too tight, you definitely do not want to force this. If you strip these screws out, you're going to be in a world of trouble, and probably going to stop you in your tracks. So fit that bit in there, make sure that it's snug, it's obviously the right size. Some people are under the impression that all Phillips heads are the same. They are not. They are different sizes and shapes, and you need to find the right shape and size to fit that screw perfectly to get this to work out. Alright, we're going to be doing this in reverse. Put that in the screw hole there. These I've already loosened up. Just going to back those out. And the positive here, again, we've checked, make sure there's no voltage at these terminals before working on this. Check twice, cut once. Don't take any chances. This is definitely dangerous, and if you forget that switch in the on position, there's a reason why Honda doesn't want you inside this battery pack. Right here on the sticker, high voltage, you could be killed or hurt, so definitely you want to be conscious of what you're doing. Alright, with these screws removed here, we got the positive. I'm going to take the positive and the screw for the positive here, put that in the eyelet, and put this back on here. Alright, just a half a turn to get that started. And the negative was right here. Got the negative running to this terminal. We're going to want to route these and make sure they can be routed so that nothing's sticking out, nothing's getting pinched. So I have this bent in kind of a semi-L formation, so nothing gets strained or are pulled out of place. We're gonna make sure this is centered on there and that nice and tight. This one here, negative terminal. Definitely nice and tight there. Probably not a bad idea if you want to pop this out. Actually, we'll skip that. That's a positive. We don't want those too close together. Alright, so taking some of the supplied zip ties at this point and probably grabbing this guy right here, making sure that nothing gets pulled or tugged out of place, and another zip tie probably like right here, and that would give you a secure connection to reinstall the battery pack and put this thing back together. Now that we have all our connections made. Now that those connections are made, we can put the battery back into its slot here. Again, in your circumstance, you would have these zip tied. I'm actually going to be removing this harness, so I'm not going to put those on for now. But easily slide this back into place. Again, it does weigh a good amount. Make sure you're not pinching anything, nothing gets caught. And you're going to go ahead and get one of your 12mm bolts ready. What I found that works is if you can leverage yourself to pull up on this battery pack while you're putting this bolt in here and get that thing started. You're going to want to do the tops first. Same goes here on this side here. I'll wiggle that into place and get these lined up. Definitely don't want to strip these bolts out too, so take care of making sure they put a good 4 threads in there without feeling like they're binding up. And then of course grab your extension with your 12mm, and you want to get that put back into place. Get that started. And lastly, last 12mm. There's no power running to any of these plastic connections here, so go ahead and get those bolts started. And that's about it. Everything is the reverse of the removal. And if you have any questions, please send us an email or give us a call. We'll see if we can run through it. There are some different versions of the battery top, so if your battery connections do not look exactly like the one that I have here pictured, give us an email and or send us a picture, and we'll work with you to locate a more appropriate place to make your connections. There's been some warranty packs over the years, and you never know what pack Honda's going to give you. You never know what pack you're going to get. If you have replaced your pack before, you might have a different configuration at the top with different connections. So definitely, if you have any questions about it, if it doesn't look exactly the way it is in this video, please give us a message, and we will definitely work with you to get you the right connections there, so that your charger works properly and you have the positive and negative sorted.